first things first, right? We do have to make our way into WebForms for some of these utilities that we're going to be using today. Okay, there's two different ways that you can go about that, and you can choose which one works a little bit better for. It really comes down to preference, let's say. If I'm already logged in here on itsorealestate.ca, right, on my matrix dashboard or on the MLS system, I'm just one click away from being in WebForms. If that's the place you would like to go, where you access it is just by hovering Tools and clicking on this link titled WebForms 2019. If I click on that, you'll notice it'll pop up a new tab, and it'll kind of go through this pre-flight check and make its way into the landing page for WebForms, which is going to be its own type of dashboard that is set up. Okay, this dashboard, just like the matrix dashboard, can be completely manipulated. We will talk about that a little bit later on in the session, so don't worry if mine looks a little bit different than yours. Okay, that's one way. So again, just making your way to matrix first, hovering Tools and clicking on WebForms. That'd be one of the ways that you can get through here. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to close these tabs quickly. Whoops, clicked on that too quickly. If I go history, I am just going to clear the browsing data so that I'm logged out of everything, because I want to show you one different way that you can also access WebForms if this happens to be your preference. Whoa, that's not how you spell it. WebForms.ca. Okay, if you make your way directly, right? So if I don't want to go through the MLS system first, I just want to go straight to WebForms, you absolutely have that as an option as well. Okay, so if I just type in something like webforms.ca, you can see it brings me to Korea WebForms. I have a big sign in button right towards the top here. And when I click on that, it'll pull me through the realtor link. If I choose my board or association, being Oakville Milton, if I could track it down, I'll take you to the kind of familiar Clarity login that you have set up. So if I just put in my OMID and password, okay, same exact thing, except this time I just went directly there. It'll do its pre-flight check. It'll kind of give me the, a little check mark all the way down, and I'll still land right on that very same dashboard. Okay, so whether you prefer going that route through the MLS system, Tools, and WebForms, or if perhaps you just want to go to webforms.ca and go straight away. For example, right, if maybe I'm on a tablet and I just want to get there quickly, maybe I will just go to webforms.ca. But I want to make everyone aware, like there's different ways that you can get there. And if whichever one's your preference, you can make use of that one, absolutely. Okay. Now that we're here though, let me break down the two topics that we're going to be going over for today's session. Okay, we are going to start with everything Authentisign related. Okay, what we're going to do in that section is we're going to sign a document. I'm going to open it up here. It's on my desktop in the background. It is a pretty silly document. I mean, I just did something very quick, something that's going to apply to just about any situation, just so that we have something for practice. Okay, so you could see it's just how to sign any document, and what I've put on there is details of a couple different participants, a spot for signatures, dates, and possibly some initial spots as well. Some really general things that are going to apply to any kind of document you might have to sign, or perhaps even when you think about it, even if it's a real estate transaction, right? All of this is going to apply, and maybe there's just a couple extra spots where you have to bring in the signatures and the initials where those might come up for the particular form that you're using. But we're going to use this as an example because it kind of gives us all of those practice tools. So we'll be signing that document from the client's perspective so that you can see that whole process of Authentisign from creation all the way to the time when it's kind of fully signed. Okay, that's the first half of the session. As soon as we conclude with all that Authentisign information, that's where we're going to transition into topic number 2, which is more of a kind of an introductory walkthrough of this WebForms utility. What we're going to do in that section is we're going to talk a little bit about this dashboard, how to kind of get comfortable, we're going to set up a foundation for the different options that you have on the left, get more familiar with some of the bells and whistles over here. And then we're going to start a really quick transaction. We'll start a transaction. We're going to add an agreement of purchase and sale. And we're going to see what it looks like to format clauses when we put them on that form. Okay, so kind of introductory WEBForms second half. First half is everything Authentisign. Okay, so let's get that started. As you saw, there was a couple ways that I logged into WEBForms here and got it up on screen. One thing that you should absolutely notice once you make your way into WEBForms is this Authentisign pen. Okay, and the reason why this one is integrated, it's built right into this platform, and the reason for that is because the fact that Transaction Desk and Lone Wolf Technologies, the umbrella company that kind of owns this real estate transaction suite here, which Kriya has chosen to go with, well, in fact, Lone Wolf actually acquired Instanet Solutions early last year. Instanet Solutions is the company that runs Authentisign, and as a result, Kriya approached them and they came up with an agreement that every Kriya member in Ontario will have access to Authentisign from within WEBForms. Okay, so being that everyone in this session is an OMDREB member, they're also a participating Kriya member, as you heard earlier, which means that you will have access to Authentisign. It doesn't cost anything extra. It's all part of that agreement and all part of those that portion of your membership that goes to Kriya in the first place. Okay. Before we hop into the section called called Authentisign from the left here, the part that I want to show you really quickly as well is you're more than welcome to link a third-party signing option if that's your preference as well. It's something that happens in the App Store. So this little icon of kind of the shopping cart, if I open this up and I go into App Store, well, I'm going to notice some different options from this screen. If, for example, I'm working at a brokerage and in the agreement that I have or the membership that I have with that brokerage, perhaps they provide me a DocuSign license. Well, if that's the case, I'm just going to go ahead and click on link. It'll ask me for my login credentials. And as soon as I log in, it'll be linked from then on. Rather than saying link, it's actually the button color will change and it'll actually change to unlink once it's properly kind of bridged across the two accounts there. Okay, what that means is you really can use any of these third-party options. Kriya has mentioned that at any time that some more common ones, or if there's any additional ones that pop up moving forward, they're going to include them as well. But this is a really good place. If you're curious, you want to see or explore a little bit about a different signing option, you're more than welcome to attach them to WEBForms, and it could be prepared that way so that when you're at the transaction level and you're ready to send them to a signing partner, it'll give you the multiple options. Since I only have Authentisign linked, however, when I get into the transaction, I'm only going to see Authentisign. If I added a second one, it would show me both of them and I could choose one or the other. Okay, but you can hop in here, link them. If you are on that side where you're a little bit curious about seeing what is available in the other ones, sometimes these offer 30-day trials and stuff like that. So maybe you click on the link button, look at the next one website. Perhaps there's a free trial. You can compare Authentisign to next one and see if it is something that interests you. But the only one we're covering is Authentisign, the one that we have included, of course. Okay, so just remember, that's all in App Store if you happen to be if you happen to have an option where you want to link an extra account. Let me open up Authentisign here. So you may have noticed me from the left-hand side, I'm going to be clicking on this red kind of 3-line menu, right? Opening it up so that it gives me the names of the different icons while we get familiar with them. I'm going to go ahead and click on Authentisign, and we can sort of get started here. So from this screen, some of the things that are going to be really, really consistent here, right? Things that are going to be pretty related to the different screens that we're going to work in inside of WEBForms. Well, we can tell that everything is kind of shown up in a particular list form. Something pretty consistent here is something that if I want to create something new on WebForms, there's most likely going to be, you know, an add button, something to allow me to create something new. Okay, there might be some selection options that I have. Right, so all this is going to be pretty consistent throughout the different screens, especially since the Authentisign portion has been integrated and built right into this platform of WebForms. Our kind of goal here is we're going to be taking that file that I have on my desktop and we're going to start designing it so that we can do an e-signature. So let's go ahead and create a new Authentisign. I'm just going to click on this plus and we'll get it started. Whenever you create something new for WebForms, typically the only thing it's going to ask you that's mandatory is just naming that particular item. So in this case, right, I can tell that everything else on screen is pretty optional. The only thing that's mandatory or in red is this signing name. Okay, I'm going to give it a pretty general name here. Let's go esign any document. I don't know, that's good enough. Do I currently want to link it to any form of transaction that I might have already started? In our case, no, we're just going to be signing a standalone document that we have on the desktop, a PDF file that we're bringing in. And this checkbox here for go to new signing is just asking, hey, do you want to just name it and save it and work on it later? Or do you want to hop in and actually start designing? So I'm going to leave this checked off so that it puts us right into that other screen where we could start creating it. But all I've really done here is I've just, all we've done is name it so far. Save that, we'll let it load, and then it'll put us in the creation screen for this e-signature, which is made up of 4 pretty simple steps that we're going to walk through together. Okay, we can see our title towards the top, description of kind of when we started, and the 4 steps that we have here are some quick details. Okay, who are the participants or the individuals that are going to be looking over this document? What are the documents or the forms or the items that are going to be attached here? And then the design is, well, where on those documents is the signature or the action going to take place? Okay, so pretty simple. 4 steps here that we're going to walk through really quick. If I open up the details section here, we'll notice that we have kind of two choices ahead of us. As far as the participant order, and all it's asking us is there perhaps kind of an order for which participant signs first, second, third, that kind of thing? Or is it just more of a first come, first serve type of thing where whoever gets to the document first can sign and then so on and so forth with whoever gets there next? We're going to go for the more conventional sign in line. Okay, in this case, perhaps our scenario is the first individual that sees the document is an employee. They sign first. Their manager is going to receive that signed copy and they're going to sign second, and so on and so forth to perhaps a CEO that's going to receive that document third, and then they'll add their signature at that point. Okay, so kind of signing participants sign in order, just a conventional one that we'll go with. Of course, that other option is just pretty self-explanatory, right? First come, first serve. If there is no particular order, that's what that other option is describing. Now that we've selected the order for our participants, our next step is pretty much just going to step 2 here and choosing who in fact are those participants. We get a little window here that pops up. It's an add participant screen, and it's telling us, well, how do we want to add in these individuals? Is it going to be a new participant? Okay, are we just going to be going through a blank form and filling out the info? Is it perhaps an individual that I have created in my contacts list on my WebForms account? That's option 2. And from time to time, am I perhaps adding myself in this case where I will be taking part in some form of signing here? Okay, in our case, we're definitely just going to go with new participants so we can see what the blank form looks like. So I'll click on that. Okay, now I'm on an add new participant screen. Always keep an eye on which things are mandatory when you make your way in. So I can tell that with the asterisks and the things that are in red here, the bare minimum that we have to fill out is the type of participant, their name, and their email address, Well, this is how they're going to receive that invitation to participate in the signing. So we definitely need that. As far as the type, okay, the way that I typically look at these is based on the amount of responsibility or how many actions the individual is actually going to have to undertake. When they are a remote signer or perhaps an in-person signer, either way, this means that the individual, who we haven't named just yet, well, the individual is going to have to sign the document, like they're physically taking an action on the document. That's the first two here. Okay, kind of decreases in level of responsibility as we go towards the right. If I chose this as perhaps a reviewer, well, in that case, the individual that we're going to name in a second, well, they wouldn't be signing the document. Perhaps they just have to glance at the document and give it, you know, a little check mark of approval. So they didn't physically sign it, but they had to review it, they had to receive it and approve it. And then the least amount of responsibility, of course, is just a CC only. It's based on an email service, so very much like an email. Is there perhaps a, you know, an admin assistant, or does this just have to get stored somewhere? Does someone have to receive it? They get CC'd on it, they get the copy of that file or that document, just if it's for archiving purposes or whatever the case. Okay, so we have individuals that sign, an individual that just looks it over, and then perhaps someone that just needs to store it. We're going to go with a remote signer. We want to see what it looks like to actually sign the document. So we'll go ahead and put some info here. I don't know. I really should prepare some names. I always have to just make one up, but I'm going to go with Melanie, if I could spell it. Melanie. I don't know where I'm getting these names, but today's session, it's going to be Melanie Scott, our participant 1. Okay, and so that we can actually receive this and see what it looks like from Melanie's perspective, I am going to send it just to my email here for practice. So it is going to be us kind of signing it, but we'll go with Melanie Scott, and it's going to get sent to eric@omdreb.ca so that I get that invitation and we can see what it looks like from Melanie's perspective. Okay, as you can see, the rest of the info is completely optional. Whether I'm entering any address information, postal code, all that kind of stuff, the importance here is that we have the type, the name, and the email set out. Okay. Once we're ready, we can either add this individual, okay, or if we're looking to add another one, we can just kind of refresh the screen so we get kind of another blank screen and we could start from an additional participant. Okay, so you can see in the background we have 1 so far. It's kind of obscure to kind of see it, but I would expect that Melanie Scott is back there. And what type of signer is our second participant? Well, I'm going to keep it as a remote signer. What do we want to do here? I don't know. That's just what came to mind. So we're going to go with Brian James as our second one. And we'll go, it's still going to be Eric@omdreb. The only thing I'm going to do, though, is so that I could show you some things later on, I'm going to throw in a really random email address that doesn't exist. This one is not going to deliver. It's going to bounce back. But I'll show you how you can fix that later. So this is kind of on purpose, just because we're doing a bit of a session together here. So we have a remote signer. It's Brian James. I used another example of an email. And we'll go with that. I'm going to click add this time. Last time I did add another and it gave us the blank page. We're just going to click on add so that we could see. It'll kind of get that screen to move away. If I ever wanted to go back in because I had more participants, you still have the button right here. Something to notice as well, right? I can always delete one of the participants if I think that perhaps I made an error or there's something that I want to fix. Right, like if I notice right now, hey, you know what, that email is probably going to be undeliverable. Maybe I delete it or go in to edit it, that type of thing. Notice as well, when you hover this left-hand side over towards these kind of gray lines that are there. Maybe I'll zoom in one more time, try and go a bit closer to see. Perhaps some members are joining us on smartphones or tablets, and apologies, I hope that you can kind of tell, but it's going from over here. If I'm in the white space, right, you can tell that the cursor is like a pointer, and if I hover the gray area, it goes into this 4-pointed arrow Whenever you get the 4-pointed arrow, typically you'll have the option to move something. So if I click and drag Melanie Scott and then drop her down below, you'll notice she has now become participant number 2. So you can always change the order of your participants, the very same way that once we have documents, we could change the order of those as well. Okay, so I'm going to switch it back, just drag and drop, so that Melanie is participant 1, and Eric at OMDREB is going to be the one receiving that particular invitation to this e-signature. So I'll close that one up, and just like that, we're already in step number 3, moving over to the document section. Which type of file or form are we in fact going to be setting up for this e-signature? Okay, so let's maybe talk about the different options that we have here on screen. Whole bunch of different ways that you could bring in that particular document or that particular form. First off, the first and second option refers to your WEBForms account. Am I going to select the particular form from the standard forms, maybe the ARIA folder, perhaps? Am I instead going to select it from a transaction that I've already begun or started on my WEBForms account? That's the first two. The very next one here has to do with the different cloud storage options that maybe I use, right? Maybe if I use a Google Dropbox and that's where I stored the file, I would just click on this, make my way through, and grab it from my Dropbox. When you look towards the bottom, you see some other pretty self-explanatory ones. Well, upload a file is the one that we need, just because the file itself, that PDF file that we're going to be using, is in fact on the desktop over here. So upload a file is the one that will browse your computer. If I click on that one, okay, click on upload a file, you'll notice it's saying this PC on the desktop, and the file that we need is the one titled test signing for Authentisign training. Not very creative, but that's what I named it. So we have our test signing here. If I click open, it's just going to load, and it's going to bring in that particular file. Okay. I want to do a really quick preview of it. I could always click on the title, just double check that it's the correct one. Perfect. I'll click close here at the top. I'm really zoomed in, so we're not seeing all sides of the form at once. But as you can see, just like I mentioned, right, we just have the one file that we're going to be using. But if I wanted to change the order, let's say down the road, I'm doing a very complex transaction that has like 8 different forms. Well, I can always change the order if I want a particular one to come first, and as we make our way through all 8 of those different forms. Okay. Now our very last step in setting up this Authentisign signature or e-signing is the design section. It's a pretty crucial one. This is where we're going to be deciding on the particular file that we're using, well, where are these participants in fact going to be signing? Right? At first, it might look pretty, self-explanatory or kind of a no-brainer here, but we are assigning the mandatory portions that the individuals need to actually complete. Okay, so just leaving this blank, like I know if we're looking at the document, perhaps we know where they have to sign, but we're going to be assigning this to the particular participant and who has to complete it. How you do that is all done through the drag and drop section, more or less. If I click on drag and drop, I'll see a whole bunch of different titles here. So let me go ahead and drag and drop a couple of them so we can just see what they look like. Right, initial, some X's, maybe some date timestamps, right? I'm going to end up having to delete all those, but just so you can see, right? Like, don't be afraid to be a little bit curious and see what happens when you test something out. So we can kind of get a better idea of what they look like. So in the drag and drop is where you grab all of those different actions that the participant may have to complete, okay? Whenever you kind of select one of them as well, there might be some ways you can manipulate it. I'm holding on to this one for Melanie Scott, right? I can see that there's a little gear icon. There's also a little kind of trash bin if I want to get rid of a particular action. Right? Maybe I grab those a little bit too quickly and I've got a whole bunch that I want to get rid of. Right? Well, you could see how that's done. Okay, so this first one was a sign here option that I dragged out. We also dragged out some date timestamps. And notice here that everything that we end up doing currently has to do with the signer that we have selected towards the top right, right? If I wanted to switch to Brian James, as soon as I do that and I drag this out, you'll see it is titled Brian James. Okay, you can always switch in between the participants and stick to the one that you're currently looking to work on. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and delete all of these. And pretty much all we're doing is, again, we're just designing the actions that these participants are going to be taking when they come in and look at the document. So I'm going to stick to Melanie Scott first. It's our participant 1. And I'm just going to drag and drop a signature spot as well as a auto date, which is like a timestamp. Okay, and there's also an initial spot for Melanie Scott. So I'll drop that one into this section here. I think I'll also do one towards the left, just so we have an extra one. So with what we're seeing on screen right now, for example, if I notice that perhaps the Melanie Scott portion or the sign here is hiding particular text, right? That's where you're going to be going into this gear icon, and perhaps you can change things around. Like, notice how the sign here is pointing down. If I want to flip it vertically, now it's pointing in the upwards direction, and maybe it works a little bit better with the layout of this particular document. If I want to flip it horizontally, now it's on this right-hand side instead. So whatever is going to work a little bit better, you can maybe move things around a tiny bit. Put it back to its original direction. Maybe I drop that one here. There we go. Okay, now that those ones are completed for our first participant, I'm just going to go towards the top, switch it over to Brian James, and do something really, really similar here, where I'll just bring down the signature spot, try and drop it as accurately as I can out onto this particular line on the form. Okay, here's where I'm starting to notice something, right? Maybe it would be best if I flip this one vertically. So if you remember, we chose that the participants are going to sign in particular order from participant 1 followed by participant 2. So when Brian comes in to sign his copy, there's actually going to be a signature on this line because Melanie must have completed her copy before Brian receives his. In that case, we might be going over top of it. So let's go ahead and maybe flip this vertically. Maybe it's going to look a lot better if we do it this way, just kind of expecting the way that his copy is going to look. It's going to have a signature here since he's going to get his second. Okay, you'll see what that looks like when we go in and we actually preview it together. Put our auto date, and it looks like just our initial stuff was next. I might make this a bit smaller because it looks like the initials are a little bit larger font. There we go. Perfect. So as far as the actions that have to take place, right, double check it really quick. We have MS, Melanie Scott, and MS. So that's 3 actions that are going to take place with, of course, the automatic date that'll happen when that individual comes in and goes to sign. So 3 particular actions that have to be done manually, 1 automatic one. And for Brian, we have BJ here, which is 1, 2, 3 actions and an auto date. Okay, perfect. I think we're good to go. Now that we're this far, we would just click on the next option. It'll put us back to that screen we were working on. Okay, we can see all 4 steps have been completed here, from details all the way through to design. And this last screen here of the setup is just asking us, hey, the invitations that our participants are going to receive to their email, did we want to customize them? Do we want to change them up at all? Or is there any extra info we want to write? Well, we can always go in and customize them if we'd like. Let's instead just send the default ones, and we can have a closer look at them. So totally up to you if you want to personalize the message. I'm just going to go with the regular default ones, though, for today's example. Okay, so I'm going to click Send Invitations. The Authentisign invitations were successfully sent. Okay, perfect. Let this load, and I'm going to keep an eye on my other screen where I've got my email open. As soon as I receive my invitation to participate in the signing, technically as what was it? I think it was Melanie Scott that we chose. We'll look at that in a second. What does it look like from the participant's point of view? In the meantime, though, because it probably will take maybe 1 or 2 minutes before it hits my inbox, let's talk a little bit about this Authentisign screen, because as you can see, there are some different icons that might come into play, right? There's a lightning bolt, a couple of gears, and this little ribbon of approval as well, or like a final ribbon. Each of them means something different, okay? The very first one is when it's the gear icon, that means that it's currently in the setup process. So if you're just creating it currently, if I refresh this screen, this would change to a lightning bolt because we're done with the setup. That's when it's actually in progress. And until it goes to completion, once all the participants have completed their tasks and you're getting your confirmations, well, that's when it moves over to this ribbon of approval. So kind of 3 icons that we might notice in here. And we can always go into the signing and get more information. What I'm going to do though is I'm just going to go back to the dashboard, and then I'm going to return to this screen just to refresh it, and we should see it change over to a lightning bolt. Okay, so I went to dashboard. Now I'm going to go back to Authentisign. Perfect. So it is in progress. It's just awaiting for us to receive those emails. So let's have a look here. I think I received one so far. So let's bring that one down. At 1:42 p.m. And maybe I'll zoom in on this a bit. I think it's only the message in the middle that'll increase in size, unfortunately. But it is saying, right, we have your signature is requested, titled How to E-Sign Any Document, which is the silly title that we gave it. Signing invitation. Hello, Melanie Scott. Eric Garand is inviting you to participate as a signing party. Okay, so this is what it looks like when your client is receiving their portion of this, what they need to sign. Just get familiar with what this looks like, okay, in case they ever have questions, right? For example, which source can I trust? Well, it's come from somewhere really specific. It's secure@authentisign.com. Okay, so I mean, just in the effort of always kind of making sure that we're getting it from the right source, you could see it up here as the example. Secure@authentisign.com is where this invitation was sent from. We have a signing invitation, the default that hasn't been changed, right? And you could have manipulated this a little bit, maybe change the message if you wanted, but we went with the default. And we can see some info here. We have a start signing button here that we can click on. And it does bring in a little bit of a signature here with my credentials as the organizer. Okay. So let's go ahead and click on start signing so we can see what it is going to look like when your client comes in here for the first time. The very first thing that they're going to see is this adopt your signature screen. Okay, so I could see it's assigned a little bit of a default for Melanie Scott here. Some sort of like a cursive writing, example of what the signature will look like and what the initials will look like as well. However, your client is more than welcome to customize this or change it up. They can draw their signature or they could select a font style. This one always makes me laugh because I am really, really bad at it. I'm probably only going to give it one shot and then we'll get away from here. Okay, but if I'm trying, Jesus, now I have to do cursive on the computer. I don't even know how to do a cursive M. Oh no. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. How did you do an S? Why did I pick this name? This is not worth it. Okay, so this would be my Melanie Scott impression. Okay. The thing is with this, it's extremely difficult to get it to look good on, especially with like, I'm using a laptop and I have a mouse here. Very tough to do. If your client's doing this, I probably suggest, you know, if they have like a tablet and they're doing it with a stylus pen or something like that, well, it's probably going to turn out a lot better. This has just been absolutely butchered here. Let's close that. I think we're going to stick with the Melanie Scott default that it's given us. They're more than welcome to select a different font as well. Maybe there's some other cursive ones that pique their interest, but I'm just going to go with this default. And the only thing remaining really is just accepting to the terms of service and the end user license agreement, which they can access if they are curious about that information. Okay, so adopt a signature screen. I'm going to click on accept. And then what we see here is only the portions that have been set out for this particular individual. We know it's participant 1, and we set this up for Melanie Scott, so we knew kind of what it would look like. But we could see, right, those 3 actions that we talked about, and 1 automatic timestamp that's already happened. This one just happens as soon as the participant enters to start signing. Okay. What we could see towards the top left as well is the encrypted ID that's been assigned to this participant as well. Okay. Different ways that your client could start signing, right? They can either click on one of the action sections that they are looking to kind of complete here. So if I wanted to start by just clicking on this initial spot, well, I'm drawing a lot of blanks here. If they click on this initial spot, right, it'll drop in that preview that we saw on the Adopt a Signature screen, and it would kind of put them into the system that just like looks over this document. It kind of goes like vertically, so it like scans vertically. If it hits the first thing, it'll assign that as the first item, which you'll see happen. If I click on Start, it'll do that. It'll kind of scan through top to bottom, and just whatever it hits first will be the first one that we have to click on. So I'm going to do that now. I'll just click Start. You'll see this one kind of went downwards, hit the top of the sign here, and that's the first one that's being kind of pointed at for us to click on. As soon as we're done with that one, it'll just move down. The arrow will be over here, and we'll go to that second one. Okay, so notice as soon as I clicked, it put that Adopt a Signature, like the preview that we had on the previous screen, it dropped it right on that line. And it has in fact completed 1 of 3 mandatory fields. Our progress right now, of course, is 33%. Just click on the next one. We'll see that update 2 of 3 mandatory fields are complete, and it takes us straight to the next one each time. If there was like multiple pages, it'll walk your client through as they get through all of those signatures that require their attention. Okay, if I click on the very last one, we'll also get a pop-up here where it gives me options. Did I want to complete this signing? Perhaps I want to stay and review. And even if I wanted, maybe I went a little bit too quick and I actually wanted to reset it. So if I reset it, it would take me back here where I would go back to accepting it and moving on once again. Okay, maybe this time I click on this one first. Okay, and you'll see now vertically it changed the order a little bit. But either way, it kind of walks you through the different signatures that are taking place. Okay, so I can see after it's 100% complete, I have the option to complete it. You can always click those options that were on screen as well. If I clicked complete, it's still not done until I click this one, specifically the complete signing. That's my confirmation that I'm happy with everything. Until then though, I can stay and review, and I could just keep reading over it, making sure that everything is the way that it should be, and I only complete it when I'm ready. Okay, your client also has the option to reject the document. Okay, so bear that in mind. They can reject it. Technically, they can even exit, and they can always just come back and sign it later. Nothing is complete, okay, until they click on both complete options. This second one is that finalized, you know, I'm happy with everything, completing complete the signing. This is the one that's going to be that stamp of approval that has to happen, or else technically nothing has been signed until they click on this, right? If they go through and they tell you, hey, I clicked on all 3 and I clicked complete, well, there's still that second one. You have to click complete signing. Until then, nothing has been signed. Okay, this is the really important confirmation here. When you click on this one, just notice your client is also going to receive a specific screen here. This one was not what I was looking for. Sorry, I'll talk about this one really quick. If your client is making their way through here for the very first time, this is something that only comes up the first time that you're participating with Authentisign. And what it is it's just asking your client, hey, would you like just a temporary guest account, which will give you access to the documents in this particular signing. If I enter a password here, well, it'll allow me to go through and access the copies of the documents at any time. So either I do this as a client, or I just expect that my representation is going to share the signed copies with me. Totally up to them, but it kind of gives them this option. Okay, probably a really good time to mention as well, right? This isn't going to cost anything additional, right? Your client, if ever they ask, you say, hey, let's sign this by using Authentisign. I'm going to send it to your email and you can sign it there. That's completely included. There's no extra cost to your customer, to your client. They can use the document, they could use this guest account. Nothing is going to charge them at any point. It's totally included on your license. Okay. I'm going to click on no thanks. So I'm saying, as Melanie, I'm not looking to have access to those documents later on. And the important screen here is this confirmation screen. Okay, so we went from hitting complete signing, gave us the little transition of the guest account, which I forgot about, and then we get the confirmation. You have successfully completed your portion of the e-signing or e-signature process. Okay, it provides the encrypted ID. It also gives the click here access if you want to look at the process or the other copies. Okay, and at this point, now we're going to be receiving a whole string of different emails because this is the last step for Melanie Scott. Okay, we can close that up. What we're going to notice here is that when we go into this section of how to e-sign any document, there should be some kind of completion that occurred on the Melanie side of things for our first participant. Okay, which we're seeing here, right? Authenticated. Well, now we're seeing kind of this, I don't know, a racing flag for like final lap kind of thing, which is the fact that it's been completed rather than this awaiting approval icon that's on participant 2 right now. So you can see if I hover this one, I know it's probably really small, apologies there, but it's saying successfully completed. So the Melanie Scott portion is completed on authentication and completed on the fact that Melanie actually signed the document. I received some emails, and one of them was an email saying that it bounced back. Participant 2, it was undeliverable. As you can see, there's a big red message here talking about that fact, and that all has to do with the random digits that I put in the email. This email address doesn't exist. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a second. Okay. If I scroll down a bit, I can also see the document versions here. If it's not opened up just yet, you can click the plus. I can see the original document followed by the first revision, which is the one that Melanie just signed. If I click on that, I'll be able to see how far we are in the signing process so far. Okay, I can see that. Perfect. That's the one that Melanie signed with the encrypted ID and everything. Okay, the timestamp, when it occurred, all that good stuff. Click on close. Okay, let's have a look. I'm just going to bring over some emails from my other screen here. Okay, first off, we did receive an email. This one went directly to us as the organizer as a confirmation that the signing updated. Hello, Eric. An action has taken place. The document was accepted at 1:50 by Melanie Scott. Okay, so that was just a notification email that participant 1 has completed some work, and a follow-up email here under the Brian James version saying, hey, the signing invite failed. Your signing invite was not delivered, so it bounced back. Please correct the email and resend. That's what we're going to do now. Okay, so I wanted to show you, in the event that maybe, in the off chance that this might occur, if you've made a little bit of a typo in the email address, you can come back from this. It's not the end of the world. It is something you can fix. Okay, and you do that by just clicking on the edit button here. That's right next to the email. And you'll notice the only thing I can change is the email. So if I make an error there, no problem, that can be fixed. But if instead it was, you know, I can't change the type of signer, there's no ways that I could change the name, it's only the email address. In the event that maybe I made a typo, maybe I fixed that, and then we save the participant, and participant successfully updated, email has been sent. Okay, perfect, right? So we updated that, we made it so it's a correct email. Now we can actually receive that invitation and complete the signing. Okay, so again, if you make a little bit of an error on the email side of things, your client was saying the email over the phone and maybe you didn't hear it quite perfectly, well, you can recover from that. Okay, What we're looking for, though, is once this email comes in and we have the version for Brian James, right? We already know how to do it. We're just going to hop in, adopt the signature, click on the 3 spots, complete signing, and we're done. Okay, the icons will change here to like this this successfully completed flag. We'll also have 2 more documents down here. We'll have one titled document for how to sign any document, revision 2, followed by not an original document, but a finalized document. I don't know the exact term for it, but we're going to see those in a second. I'm just waiting for that email to come in. I think it might have just hit the inbox. 1:56 p.m. Here we go. Now we have that invitation for participant 2, secure at Authentisign.com, signing invitation. Hello, Brian James. Eric is offering you this e-signature. Perfect. Click on that. We're going to click accept on the adopt a signature. And notice how it looks a little bit different. As I mentioned, the copy that Brian receives as participant 2 has some information already on it. He can see the things that Melanie Scott agreed to. Okay. And same thing though, we can just hit the start button, make our way through these different initial spots and signatures. Once we've got all 3, right? Of course, we could stay in review. We're just going to complete signing. We know what this looks like. Click the no thanks. And there we go. This is the confirmation. You've successfully completed your portion of the e-signature process. Perfect. Close that one up. If I make my way out of here just to kind of refresh the screen, straight away even, like look how quick that was. It's moved away from the lightning bolt. It is now this ribbon approval. It's confirmed. I've got an email already. Signing updated. Hello, Eric. An action's taken place. Brian James has accepted the document. Another email just came in. Signing complete. Hello, Eric. This is an update for the organizer, right? The signature has been successfully reviewed and signed by all parties. So I even get a confirmation here that everything's done. Perfect. Okay, we can hop in there and have a quick look. The status is approved. And when we make our way in, it was as we expected, right? The flag is now on all the different participants. We have 4 copies of the document: original, revision 1, revision 2, and the final document. The final document is probably the one that I'm going to be saving for my records. Perhaps I'm viewing it as a PDF and, you know, this is the one that I'm printing or downloading, saving it to my computer as a PDF file, whatever the case may be. You know what, maybe we'll just do that. I'm going to click on download here at the top and we'll call this, geez, I don't know. Whatever. Melanie and Brian signed copy. I don't know why, but that's what we're calling it. Okay, so for example, right, if I ever wanted to see that file, I've got a lot of emails in the background, it looks like. Now, where in the world did I save this? I said desktop. It looks like it went to the other screen. Here it is. But I have a PDF here now that I can share. I can email it, print it out, send it. I've got something for my records, and when I open it, it is this signed version of the document with all those like encrypted portions that the individuals put on themselves, time-stamped, dated. We can see when it was accepted. Okay, this secure document that is signed by all parties. Okay. In our case, right, we didn't use a legal document or anything like that, just a testing document for the purposes of today's training session. But we got to see all the different sides of it, right? Hopefully this gave you a really, really good familiarity for the different things that you're working through, right? Maybe if this is like one of the first times that you saw this process, well, using Authentisign is, in fact, it's pretty simple, right? We got to see that it was just kind of 4 easy steps to follow. Things are pretty straightforward from your client's perspective as they are the participant. And what I would suggest is just when you have a chance as well, maybe recreate something similar to what we just did together. I was going through like sort of quickly describing some of the things that we were going to work on, but really going through that process at least once yourself so that if your client, you know, calls or asks any questions, you're just kind of prepared to answer that type of stuff. Okay. I don't know what's going on with my internet. It looks like it's it's having a tough time loading this screen here. So I'll give this a quick second. I'm hoping that it's going to eventually take us to the dashboard of WEBForms, because that does wrap up that first half of the session, right? Everything Authentisign related. I think we went pretty thoroughly through the different things that might come up, different sections and kind of motions that are going to take place as you sign any document. Because the thing is, I did sign a silly document that was just kind of something I went into Word and, you know, created something, saved it, and used it as a PDF. But really, the idea that I want you to take from it is, first off, it doesn't have to be a real estate transaction. Like, use this access to Authentisign that you have to sign anything you'd like. First off, like, it doesn't have to be a real estate transaction. If it is a real estate transaction, everything that we went over today is still going to apply, right? If you have 7 or 8 different forms because it's a complex, you know, commercial transaction or commercial deal that you're working on, well, everything still applies, right? It's your 4 steps. When you get to the design, you're just slowly going through them 1 page at a time, but everything is going to look really, really similar, okay? But I would definitely suggest practicing a little bit whenever you have a second, okay? Beauty. That is everything Authentisign related. Let's transition into topic number 2. As I said, this is the part where we're going to go through and set up a bit of a foundation, some structure. If this is a little bit newer, if WEBForms is a bit newer for you, let's go through so that we understand how the icons work, some of the menus that might be hidden, and we're going to do a really quick transaction together where we'll have a closer look at the features and the formatting of an agreement of purchase and sale. Okay, so let's hop straight into that. When it comes to WEBForms in general, again, you're always going to see me kind of toggling these different menus. The very, very first idea that I want to jump into, though, has to do with your landing page. As I said, we're going to talk a little bit about this dashboard concept here. So what happens on your dashboard is very much like your ITSO real estate or your matrix dashboard. Is you can totally change this around, manipulate it, and move things in the order that you'd like. I left it pretty standard here, where there's just a couple of things, like a button if I want to start a new Authentisign transaction, a button here if I want to create a new WEBForms transaction, and also a list of like the preview transactions that I've started so far. Okay. If I ever want to change that, though, it's this right-hand side where there's a lock. If I unlock it, that's when it gives me options to actually manipulate what's down on this screen. And if I close everything out, you'll notice it tells me drag and drop widgets to get started. Technically, if I have nothing on my dashboard, right, this is like square one, I can see there's a whole bunch of blue options. These are like actions that I can take. And then all the green ones here are like different lists and previews. So, you know, if I start looking at these, like technically I could drag down as many as I'd like. We can move them in a particular order. Okay, you can also resize them however you'd like. Okay, and you can see all that info in whichever way you see fit. Okay, this dashboard can be as busy or as simplified as you'd like. And as you saw, when we got in here, I did have it pretty simplified. Make this a little bit bigger so I get the X. I think what we had was, it was just a creation button for the transaction that I might change the size of. Maybe that's, here, you know what, leave that the way it is. And what I had was, just for mine, I decided to go with a list of my current transactions. And however you want to set it up, totally up to you. Click back on that lock and you'll see from then on, it just kind of locks in place. Okay, I can't manipulate it until I go back and unlock it once again. Okay. One more really, really quick thing to mention here towards the top is you have a really, really good help resource that Kriya put together. Quick Start would be like a how-to, like PDF images and like a walkthrough of the steps. And the little screen here, How Do I, would be a really short video that Kriya put together. They're all couple minutes long. I think like every single one is less than 5 minutes. They're mostly around like 1 or 2 minutes long to just walk you through how to do a certain task on web forms. Okay, so really, really good stuff there. If I click on one, for example, I'll click on Quick Start. If I timed out, it might just ask me to click on my Realtor Link credentials once again. Looks like we haven't timed out. It just put us straight through, which is nice. If you're looking for a way to visualize what this is giving me, well, I like to think of it as kind of like a table of contents that you would see in perhaps like in a textbook. I could see it starts with a bit of an introduction. There's a body, different items and paragraphs here, and in conclusion there's a bunch of like glossary and appendix sections. So it's kind of like a textbook. As you make your way through what you're looking for, perhaps I'm going to jump straight into working with web forms, section C, right? And maybe I'm looking for a little bit of help on how to create a transaction template, maybe a more advanced feature of web forms, right? Well, I can see they're all titled here. So working with transaction templates, creating a transaction template in the form of a bit of like an accordion menu here as a textbook. I can make my way to what I'm looking for. And as you can see, it's going to go through all the steps with PDF images and kind of a description of everything that might come into play when you're doing something new. Okay, so really, really good help resource. Again, just remember it's towards the top. Same thing, the how do I just takes you to the spot where the videos are. So if I wanted to create a transaction template, I can always just click on this and I'll see the actual Kriya video. It's 2 minutes and 20 seconds long. And it just walks you through exactly what to do and then gives you a video here of even kind of somebody walking through and doing that on web forms, which is really awesome. Okay, so just remember, if ever in doubt, you have a help resource right here in the top right. Beauty. Now, let's go and we're just going to tackle some of these menu options towards the left. I'll give you a really quick intro to the different options that we have here. Dashboard we know pretty well. We just talked about that one. Transactions, just to say a few sentences about that one. Well, what we'll notice is that when we're in this screen, right, this might be the screen that I prefer, you know, clicking the add button and creating my transaction from here. We know that on our dashboard, we have two things that relate to transactions because we grab them from the widget menu. We have a transaction creation button, as well as a preview list of our transactions. Well, when we go into the transactions section, we do get a much better description of those transactions. It's the same ones, as you saw, 3333 New Street, things like that. Some of them are gonna have, if I assigned a, you know, an image, a main image for it, if I pulled in MLS information or anything like that, I might see an image. But you can see like more specific information, a much more detailed breakdown from here. And every single one of them has its own, if you look horizontally here in a line, its own menu. Okay, whatever you'd like to call that menu, it's going to show up in a bunch of spots later on. Okay, sometimes if you call it like a stoplight, I know it's like 3 random little dots, but if it's like a stoplight menu, or if you want to call it the little snowman, totally up to you. But it gives you a whole bunch of different options that relate to that particular item. Just like how I would be selecting a couple out of the list here. Well, if I went into the menu, it would just relate to that specific one, kind of horizontally here. Okay, something to notice as well. Something that's going to be pretty common while you're working through the different screens on web forms is this basket feature. Anytime that you're trying to do multiple, maybe like an action that's going to affect more than one item, that's going to happen in your basket. As you can see, there's a little 3 in the basket because I selected all 3 of these. If I select 4 or 5, they're all going to be in the basket. And when I go to the basket, it'll offer us options that relate to all 5 at once. When you're at the transaction screen, it's really just kind of 1 or 2 different things. But if I wanted to, for example, I could delete all 5 of them at once, for example. Okay, so I'm just going to deselect those. We're not looking to get rid of them. Those were kind of silly random ones that I have for practice, but I'll just keep them there. Okay, just remember, the basket is kind of how you put everything into the basket and you check out all at once, just like when you're doing like online shopping or something like that. Okay, the feature is here on your web forms, and we'll see it later on for sure. So more detailed section of your transactions right here on the left. Authentisign. We're like experts at Authentisign. We know everything that's going on this screen, right? If I want to just grab one or delete them, and you can see, right? I've even used this for whether it was just me testing and playing around, or like maybe there was even like a time that I requested a day off at work and sent through a vacation form and revised it or whatever. Like really use Authentisign for whatever might come up in your day-to-day. Okay, it doesn't only have to be specific real estate stuff. All right, in the forms section, now we're getting into it. So when you look into this section, you'll start to notice the way that things are organized on web forms is in these individual folders. You can see they're titled differently. There's even an individual folder for all the particular boards as well. Quite a few different ones there. Okay, but if I ever wanted to see a standardized form, for example, like an ARIA form, an ARIA form 100, right? I might go into the ARIA folder, then make my way to the agreement of purchase and sale, or if it's a waiver or whatever the case may be, right? I make my way down to that particular form. Okay, so everything's kind of organized in these folders though, and that's going to be pretty consistent for different screens here on on web forms in general. We'll definitely add in a form to our transaction later on, and that'll come up again, right? And notice there's even sometimes a keyword search that you can make use of. We saw a second ago that the waiver, just a standard waiver, is form 123. So whether I type in 123 to see all those options, or if I type in a keyword like waiver, right, they're all going to come up. And I would just kind of look through here till I track down perhaps the ARIA version if that's what I wanted. Okay, whatever the case may be, purchase and sale. If I'm looking at just the options that have purchase and sale in the title. Okay, just erase that. That'll come back up, and we'll look at that a little bit later on. All right, now we're getting into the more bells and whistles, documents, tasks, faxing, things like that. Very optional pieces. I won't spend too long on them, but I do want to show you some features in case it interests you. When it comes to documents, okay, here's a section where you have access to store some files that might be really useful for you. Okay, so the whole idea is if you're looking to store some files that you want to access from any device, this might be a really good spot to just throw some things in. Okay, if I go into documents, you'll notice if I go to my folders, well, I click the add button and I created a folder called Eric's training resources for obvious reasons. And just for kind of testing purposes, I've put in a whole bunch of different files here so that we could see what it is going to accept. For example, I've got like Excel files, some image files. You can bring in PDF documents and things like that. Okay, let's go ahead and just add one really quick to this folder called Eric's training resources. If I click the add button and I go to add a new document, it's going to give me this pop-up saying, hey, you can upload up to 20 files at once. Awesome. And I can either drag and drop or click to upload. So the one that's here, Melanie and Brian's signed copy. Well, if I want to have access to this PDF file from my smartphone or my tablet later on when I'm kind of meeting up with my client, maybe I just drop it in here and then I can access it from any device. Okay, here it is, Melanie and Brian's signed copy. As long as I can log into web forms from the device that I'm on, I can access this PDF file. Okay, so it kind of makes it easier. I don't know if you'd prefer this option to, instead of carrying like a little USB stick or whatever the case may be, right? If you popped it in here, you could access this from any device that you have an internet connection to. Okay, I just go to webforms.ca, I log in, I come to documents, I make my way over to Melanie and Brian's signed copy. Now I have that on my computer. I can download it, I can print it, all the options are available to me for this particular file. Okay, and that's maybe my way of bringing in the signed copy so that I could share it later on with the cooperating agent, or whatever your situation entails. Okay. What I wanted to do really, really quick before we move out of here, though, is just to show you there are some limitations to the file types that you could bring in, but you can bring in as many of those files as you want. Okay. If I try to bring in this is the PowerPoint slide that was on screen at the start, right? If I bring this one over and I drag it into here, it's not going to let me. Okay. It's like a PowerPoint file. It's going to tell me pretty quickly, hey, you cannot bring in a PowerPoint file. What you can bring in, though, is documents, so like Word documents, Excel documents, all the different types of image files. It won't let me do like an MP4. I can't bring in like a full-length movie or anything like that, but I can bring in, think of the utility for some of these. What if it's a Schedule B that I saved as a PDF? Could be a survey, COVID form, could be a whole bunch of supplements for a particular transaction, and I save them in a particular file here under documents, and I could just quickly access all of those at once. Maybe it's even just particular branding for, I don't know, a CMA that I'm working on, right? Like, it could be anything you want. You can access it from any device if you choose to save it in your documents section. Okay, so whether you find that useful, totally up to you. Okay, but just notice, right? You can always work on that, get a preview, all that kind of stuff. Get back to the dashboard here. So that's documents. It gets more and more into kind of bells and whistles here as we move down. So tasks, right? I can go forever without ever touching tasks. All this is just to let you know what it is. It's just a reminders application that you have. If that's of interest to you, how it works is you can set up certain tasks. You can see mine are probably a little bit silly, but that's all it is. It's just like, if perhaps I'm working and I want to set a task for myself, I have the option, right? If I'm working with a colleague and I bring them in on this task, well, I can do, hey, Mark, can you perhaps go in and work on this MLS information and kind of just get this transaction ready to go by 12 o'clock tomorrow? Well, it'll give us both and keep us both updated as my colleague completes that particular task, right? You can see, just like the other ones, it moves to completion. You're going to receive emails of notifications of how it's going, all that kind of stuff. So just a bit of a reminder section, totally optional though. Okay, one of our last ones here, very much optional. And the idea here is you have an online faxing service that you can use if you'd like. It works through email, okay? Whenever I ask about this one, apparently faxing is something that's a little bit more common in the US still, and just being that lone wolf is kind of like a major provider for real estate services in the United States. It looks like they kept a faxing option here. I'd say, especially in Canada, we're very much moved over to e-signature and signing options, using Authentisign, DocuSign, things like that. So if you aren't in a scenario where you're using faxing, no worries, just skip right past it. But you do have one here if you're curious and you want to see how it works. Feel free to hop in there. Next up, we have a contacts section. You'll see mine's pretty boring. It's pretty empty. Totally up to you if you want to make use of it, right? All that I would suggest is if you are looking to add in a contact and take the time to add in contact information, I'd say more or less, like, think about it most likely being an individual that you're going to use more than once, right? If it's just a prospective client that is only going to show up once and maybe never again, if it's just like a particular seller's name, right? Maybe I don't need the seller's name to be a contact that I have like specific address details and all that information. Maybe I don't have to take the time to put all that in. However, if it's a lawyer that I use every single time that I do a transaction, every single time I do a residential sale, if I'm going to the same real estate lawyer, I'm probably going to create their contact information so that it's easy to just grab it and pop it in when I'm going through the transaction stage. Okay, so maybe something to consider. If you're on the total opposite side of that, right, that's just kind of how I think of contacts. But if you have your own opinion and you just want to have all of your contacts, no problem. There is a way that you could bring them in. It's just one way though, okay? So if you want to import your entire contacts list, let's say you have like 400 contacts and you want to bring them in, no problem, you can do that. But you do it by adding them from Google. What that means is I may have to create, if I don't have a Google account, like a Gmail account, I might just have to create one really quick, okay? If I'm using Outlook, and I'm more specifically, I have all 400 contacts on my Outlook account, I might have to just import them to Google first and then use my Google account to import all of them here to WEBForms. But either way, if all I have to do is create a Gmail account or some sort of link there, it's probably still a lot faster than adding in 400 contacts one at a time. So totally up to you. However you manage this is at the end of the day is your choice. My take on it usually is, you know, if it's going to be someone that I'm going to use on 10 transactions this year, I'll probably take the time to add them in. Everyone else, though, not super worried about it. Okay. Beauty. That brings us over to the setup. We're going to use the setup more as a conclusion. Okay. Once we have a better feel for what a transaction looks like, we'll make our way back in here. If I'm saying a couple of words about this section, though, there are some really, really important items in here. Okay. The setup is where you're going to set up and lay down some groundwork that is really going to save you some time moving forward. Things like, you know, your personal clauses, adding in those clauses so you can access them later. It happens in the setup and into the clauses section. If I want to create, you know, a cookie cutter that's going to apply to a whole range of different transactions, something like a transaction template, well, I'm going to come into the setup to create that. So just notice that it's like setting up the groundwork. It's going to save me some time later on. It all happens in the setup. What we're going to do in conclusion here is we're going to go into the program settings later on, where we could see all the different items that make up WEBForms, like the form settings, the transaction settings, things like that. And maybe there's a couple of them that we could tweak to even save some time there too. Okay, so we'll double back to the setup, but again, to really hit that home, setup, super important. Okay, you lay down some groundwork in here. It's going to make you so much more efficient. App Store, we are also experts on that one, and the other two are pretty self-explanatory, right? Like a support option, and I could always just log out from the bottom button here. So that really does wrap up this, this whole menu on the left, which is nice. Now that we've done that, let's move to the other option. We're actually going to create a transaction together, and again, same feel, just like an introductory kind of way. Let's get familiar with the layout of that transaction and what it's like to add a form and things like that. Okay. So the options that I have in front of me here, I can either create a new transaction from my dashboard because we've pulled down that widget, or we could go into transactions and click the little plus sign. Either way, same exact menu will pop up. Things to notice, just like before, the only thing that's mandatory for us in this case is naming this transaction. The type, whether I want to import MLS information, if I want to add myself in, or use the wizard, the rest of this is totally optional. Importance is that we name it though, okay? What are we going to name it? It was Melanie Scott earlier, so why not? We'll just keep that name. I'm going to name it 125 Navy Street. I like using our main office as my example, and Melanie Scott. Okay, so we're doing 125 Navy Street. Melanie Scott is going to be the name of this transaction. If we're setting a type of transaction, this won't have any bearing on what happens moving forward. It's just asking you, as far as with regards to the rest of your transactions, did you want to organize it into a category just for yourself? This will not change anything moving forward other than, do I want to be more organized? Is this going to be a residential sale? Up to you. I'm just going to leave it blank. Our next question, do we want to import data perhaps? If I am, right, I might go to the Oakville Milton MLS and put in a number like, 40125, whatever the case may be for an Oakville Milton style MLS number, right? Maybe if it was like a Hamilton Burlington number, it'd be something more like this, or a Toronto number, Toronto Real Estate Board, right? So I'm selecting the source board here, but what if it was something like, I don't know, I think they have things like Central Toronto or like West Toronto, things like that, if I can get it to switch to that, right? So choosing the source board, entering the MLS number on that source board. Whoops, trying to go back to source board because I'm just leaving this optional. We're just going to look at things together. Optional, we're not going to be pulling in MLS information. If we wanted to, I wonder if we could. I mean, it's 125 Navy. I don't know if we're going to find an MLS version of it. But if we wanted to pull in MLS data, we would do it from here. Okay. As well, adding ourselves in. Are we going to be a listing salesperson? Are we acting on both sides of the deal? Are we just going to be neither? Like, I'm not looking to bring in myself as any of the credentials or do I want to bring myself in as a contact on this transaction? I'm just going to put neither. And that last thing we saw, use wizard. Okay. Don't get hung up on the word wizard. I know it's the silliest word in the world, I guess. All it means is, do you want to follow a setup process? That's it. Wizard means setup. Totally optional. I'll show you what the wizard looks like later on. It's a 5-step process. If you prefer the wizard, use it. I'm going to uncheck it because I want everything down here to be optional. The only thing we really did is we just named our transaction at the end of the day. And we're going to hit create. Once it loads, the landing page, the first time we go into a transaction, is actually the details screen. This is also the screen that'll get kind of filled in if we import MLS information. I know we didn't import any, but if we noticed, hey, I did mean to bring in some MLS info, well, you would actually go to your snowman menu, and then you would import data. That's how we get that pop-up back where we can choose the MLS source, for example. And as we import that info, it all pops into this details screen. Okay, we just opted to enter it manually. That's the only thing we've done here. Okay, we can see something really significant as well. We have a 3-line menu, like a stack menu, towards the right-hand side now. That is very important to make as a distinction. Okay, we know what happens on the left. Everything on the left is still available to us. But we know the stuff on the left has to do with our overall WEBForms profile. However, the stuff on the right, all these new menu options, they all relate to 125 Navy Street, Melanie Scott. It's really, really important to make that and understand that. Make that distinction. The two menus are totally different. Overall WEBForms account, specific to the transaction at hand. Okay, right and left, or wow, I did those backwards, but right and left, totally different things that they're referring to. If I want to go into the forms for this transaction, I'm absolutely doing that from the right-hand side. If I want to go to the dashboard of this transaction dashboard, it's on the right-hand side. There is a little preview menu that I can look at for my understandably pretty empty transaction right now. We haven't added any forms to it. Okay, everything here on the right refers to 125 Navy for Melanie Scott, our new transaction that we're working on. So important to understand that. Let's start by talking about the details screen. Okay, we can see here it kind of starts with details. There's a whole bunch of different items and boxes here that we could fill out, pricing options, transaction dates towards the bottom. The details screen is very specific and very significant as well. Okay, what happens is this is your distribution form So what it does is it pushes information anytime something matches up with a certain field, such as our street number, street name. It comes from the details screen and it pushes from here over to any of the forms that I'll add later on. If I add an agreement of purchase and sale later on and I enter information here, I would expect this to make its way through to that agreement of purchase and sale in any section that holds a street number, street name. Okay, this is a distribution form. It goes from here and it goes out to all your forms later on. So it's a very significant kind of section to be filling in. Something as well to note about it. Well, WebForms in general has like auto save features. All the different screens you're working on, it saves automatically. It always stays up to date. Details is one of the only places where you have to manually confirm your changes. I just typed in 125 Navy. You saw before I typed anything in, I could click, I was kind of jumping around, going to different spots. Now that I've typed something on this screen, however, if I try to leave, there will be a would you like to confirm your changes, yes or no type of thing. Okay, so if I click on, I don't know, if I just click on dashboard like we did before, it's going to be a pop-up. You are about to leave the page. Would you like to save your changes? It's just talking about 125 Navy Street that we just typed in. But it is like an extra precaution here because it understands that that's a distribution form. And later on, or maybe if I had like 8 different real estate forms all inside of my folder here, technically I might be affecting 8 different legal documents. Okay, so it's like a little bit of a safety precaution. Are you sure that's what you want to put there? Later on, it is going to affect your forms. That's all it's saying. I'm going to go with yes. Okay, property details saved. You can see a confirmation there. If I go back to details, I'll see that it'll have those there moving forward until I make a change to them. Okay, but this is a very significant distribution form. Let's go ahead and if I go to forms, for example, right, and I just click on forms, it's empty. We haven't added any, and we wanted to add something. For example, I'm just going to add a random FinTrack form just as an example right now. Maybe I'm going to go for a receipt of funds record. If I go to the basket, right, I could start adding multiple forms at a time, or I could just add the one form, and we'll see it drop here in our forms section. Well, if there is like an address section that corresponds, I would expect it to fill in based on this information as well. Okay. So you saw, we just added that in really quick. So we have something. If we went to our dashboard now, we should see that it's not empty anymore. There's a preview of one form that we've added in. So start kind of compiling how we're navigating and noticing the changes happening here as we add things in. Before we add an agreement of purchase and sale, I do want to show you that option of the wizard really quick because it's also here in the top right-hand corner. As I mentioned earlier, the wizard is just a weird fancy word for setup. So if I wanted to use a 5-step process to approaching the transaction, that's all that happens when I click on the wizard. So if I click on it right now, my screen's going to change a tiny bit. It's going to say wizard at the top here on the left, and in the center of the screen, it'll give me step 1 of 5. It goes details. Step 2 is your transaction dates. I think step 3 is contacts. Step 4 is form. And then step 5 is documents. So it's just like kind of going through these options that you have on the right anyways, but if you choose the wizard, maybe it's because you like a more structured approach. So just step 1, you go through your details section, you move over to your transaction date. What is your offer date, your closing date, all that stuff. Add in your contacts. Step 3, who is your buyer, your seller, your buyer rep, all your lawyers on both sides, all that kind of stuff. Those are all the contacts that are going to make up the transaction. Next. we're gonna add our forms. In this section, we add in all the forms one at a time, right? Maybe we just add the agreement of purchase and sale for fun while we're in here. ARIA folder, agreement of purchase and sale. You know what? I'm going to add in the waiver as well, which was 1, 2, 3, since we saw that one earlier. There we go. So now there's 2 in the basket. You can always view them here, and we can add them in at the same time if we want. There we go. We have a fin track, an agreement of purchase and sale, and also a waiver just for fun. Okay. If I want to change the order of these, very similarly, understanding always on this left-hand side, if we hover this preview that no human being can physically see, that is the smallest preview in the world, you can hover it, it turns to a 4-pointed arrow, and you can kind of change the order by dragging and dropping as well. Just like when you send it to Authentisign, you can kind of grab this left side and drag them around. Okay. So we've got 3 forms in this section, and then step 5 is just, hey, is there documents we want to add? And then we click on done, and we're finished with the wizard. It says success. Little confirmation there that we're doing well, and we can see it lands on the transaction dashboard when you leave the wizard. Okay, now we can see, right? If we look towards the right, I mean the same thing. We can do the details at any point that we want. We can do our transaction dates at any point that we want. We can go to contacts, forms, and documents at any time. Totally up to you if you like using the right-hand menu, or if you want to click on the wizard and follow the steps 1 through 5. Both do the same thing, just a different approach to them, okay? What we'd really expect to see, though, is, well, if we go to one of those forms that we added, like the agreement of purchase and sale, we should see 125 Navy Street already on that form because we've saved that on our details section. It is a distribution form, and now you can see how it's reacting to our changes. Okay, there's a field here that corresponds to street number and the field that corresponds to street name. It came from our details screen and landed on the form. Okay, awesome. Noticing as well, right? We're kind of just working into different spots where now we're on an individual form. Everything that we're looking for with regards to menu options when you're on a form just happens to be towards the top center of the screen. Okay, if I look towards this left-hand side, something really familiar, a file menu. So I'm going to find things that are probably pretty familiar, you know, when I'm working on a Word document or something like that. I'd expect to find the print option inside of file followed by print. Maybe file save or file save and exit, right? So you kind of think of it in a similar sense. I'm going to click on save and exit though, just from this right-hand side. Same thing if I use the left menu, went file save and exit, or if I just click on save and exit here perhaps. But I just want to show you, as soon as I save and exit, it puts us back on that previous screen we were working on, which was our forms section. And if we go even further still back another step, maybe I jump instead all the way to the, you know, the transaction screen that we were working on, and even all the way to the dashboard, whatever the case may be. Notice kind of a little bit of a direction I took there. I really, really wanted to show you that just to kind of get that habit that, as you can see, right, technically, if I clicked on my back arrow key, it would have taken me there. But I would really, really caution against doing that. Never, ever, ever use your back and forward arrow. The whole point is, like, some of the stuff that you're doing is you're entering information, it's auto-saving, sometimes it's time-stamped. Get into the habit of totally forgetting about these arrow keys. They're only going to get you into trouble. There's always a way to move in a forward direction. Just like how if I click on this, I'm on the transaction dashboard. If I click here, I'm in my forms. And if I choose a particular form, I'm not going to click the back arrow key to go back to forms. Definitely not. I'm just going to save and exit, and I'll be back on forms. Okay. Notice that navigation. It's always forward progression, not trying to reverse, and you're just going to get in a whole bunch of trouble if you're using those options. Okay, always forward progression. Going into the form, save and exit if I want to exit out of it. Okay. All right. As far as the agreement of purchase and sale, right? Everything on here pretty straightforward. We're not looking to, enter in each of these individual fields. That's not where we're going with this. More so, let's get familiar with these top options. We want to make our way down to especially that Schedule A page, which is on page 6, where we're going to talk a little bit about formatting the clauses that go in here as well, just so we can get a little bit familiar with what that looks like. Okay. So you saw I'm using some options here to move around, and I'll talk about them really quick. So we already saw our file menu, a lot of kind of understandable options in the file menu. As we move to the right, we have some manipulation options with regards to the font style, the size of the font, things like that. A button that we click if we want to add in some clauses lower down on that Schedule A that we just saw, followed by 2 different navigation options that we have. We have one called Transaction Forms, which means it's a navigation between the different forms on this transaction. If I want to go from my agreement of purchase and sale that we're on in the background, and I just want to jump to a waiver, okay, and then I want to go back to Transaction Forms and jump to the receipt of funds record, right? You can move in between the different forms from an option like that. And you can see on all 3 of them, I did have that corresponding 125 Navy Street. It was already ready to go. Whoops, clicked on the wrong one there. Let's go back to the agreement of purchase and sale. So seeing that effect of our details screen, it pushed 125 Navy to all 3 of the forms that we have here. So there's some significance there. The next navigation option is the pages of the current form. So I could see all 6 of them, right? Page 5, probably the one that has like lawyer signature and things like that. Page 6, Schedule A. Page 1 would just be that top one with property info, right? Kind of navigation if I'm not looking to scroll down all 6 of them perhaps. Followed by some pretty regular stuff. Zooming options, markups, right? We have our Authentisign pen. Maybe if I did fill all of this out and I was just looking to send this individual form to Authentisign, I'd probably click on that pen at this point. If I instead had multiple signing options, if you remember from the App Store, I'm not going to click on it because it'll take me away from this form, but if I added in, if I had Authentisign and I linked my DocuSign and I also linked Next One, well, when I clicked on the pen, it would let me choose one of the 3 that I want to use as the e-signing. Okay, here's like an option of where I would see all 3 of them. The only one that I'll ever see in this left-hand side is Authentisign because it's integrated, but when I get into the form or I get into the transaction, there's always a pen that'll give me the other third-party options if I link them. Okay, and in conclusion here we have an add page, which would just give us a 7th Schedule A page. And if I keep clicking it, right, it would be like a 7th, an 8th, a 9th, just additional Schedule A pages that would add on. And I can always remove some of those Schedule A pages. There's an add and a remove page button, followed by a save and exit. Okay. I think that's where we'll go now, where we're just gonna go down to the Schedule A, and we'll add in some clauses so we can see what the formatting looks like, because the formatting is definitely not perfect. So let's get familiar with it. You'll notice as well, just like when I clicked on this clause button by accident earlier, it doesn't let me add in a clause until I've selected a multi-line text box. That's just talking about this big section on the Schedule A page, which feels like a silly step, but it wants us to specify that it isn't one of these single line text boxes, but it's the multi-line text box. And when I do select it and follow it up with the clause button, I can start adding in actual clauses. You can see there's a personal clause section, which means if I went into the setup, into clauses and added personal ones, that's where they'd be. If my office or my brokerage is sharing clauses to me as an individual of that brokerage, I could see it in the office clauses. I don't have any since OMDREB doesn't have an office clause folder. And then system clauses is where you get all the standardized versions of the clauses. So if I'm looking for something like a deposit pay further sum of, like a really standard clause, I'd probably hop in here. If I changed the version that I like of the deposit further sum of and saved it as a personal clause, I would instead go in there for it in the personal clause section. Okay, we're just going to go in system clauses. That's the only spot that I've got clauses. So we'll follow through here as the example. Click on English. I can always search deposit. I forget what the title ends up being. Is it deposit / pay? Yeah, there we go. Deposit / pay -01. Pay further sum of, the buyer agrees to pay a sum of, right? So, and if I wanted to add that in by selecting it, or I can kind of preview it by clicking on the title, the deposit, pay further sum of, the buyer agrees to pay a further sum of, and I could kind of look it over, compare it to maybe balance of purchase price. Is that maybe the one that I want? The deposit, pay number 2, right? And you can kind of select whichever ones you want. So kind of those similar items that we were looking at before. I'm just going to put the 1 in the basket and then go back to the clause folder. Maybe I go into English, so system clause, English, and instead of doing like a keyword search, I mean, I'm just looking to look at the formatting. So we're just going to choose environmental ones, which are super wordy, like they're like massive paragraphs. If I click on this preview, right, we'll see it's quite the clause. And you know what? I'm just going to choose like a bunch of these, maybe like 5 of them. And if I look in the basket, I've got a deposit, 5 environmental clauses, right? I can always like get rid of one. I don't know. I'll get rid of clause number 3. There we go. So now I've got 1 environmental, 1, 2, 4, and 5, and a pay further sum up. So I've got 5 clauses in my basket. And when I click OK, what I'm looking for is I'm hoping that I maximize the page and that it asks me if I want additional pages. Doesn't look like I chose enough clauses. Oh no, I needed 1 more. I should have kept that last one. Let me add that last one that we had. What was it? It was system environmental number 3, I think, that we deleted. Where is it? I should have kept that one. What was I thinking? There we go. I think it was this one. Click OK. There we go. That's what I was looking for. You have hit the max character limit. It seems as though the pay further sum of and the specific 4 environmental clauses that we chose actually fit on the page. I wanted to max the characters out like this so that it gives us a pop-up. You've hit the max character limit on this field. Would you like additional pages? Yes. Because there's something really specific that happens here when you do that. I'm going to let it load though. You want to make sure it puts you onto this new page. And I want to talk about how it doesn't format perfectly. Okay. We see the start of null and void, and it clearly got cut off from the bottom here of the clause. I don't know where the start and end of my clause is actually either. Where does this one end? This is for the benefit of, whoops, I'm really zoomed in here. The buyer. Okay, I think it starts here. This might be my last environmental clause. This offer is conditional upon, I think that's the part that I want to take out. So I would kind of just cut that section. And paste it down here. Hopefully I did that at the right part of it. So we wanted null and void, and I might just share these back up. This offer is conditional, and if I go up to this one, okay, there we go. So which part is, okay, there's still a section here that we really want to address. That's that important part that I wanted to talk about, right? If there's anything that I might change, I might do that as well. But something really significant happens when you bring in information. If you ever notice this scroll option, and that's really why I was trying to max out the characters on the form, just notice if there's ever a scroll option on your clauses on a Schedule A page, you want to address that straight away, okay? It's not fitting properly, and it does allow a little bit of extra. That portion isn't going to get cut off. If I send this to my printer right now, or I send it to Authentisign or anything like that, it's not just gonna cut this portion off that doesn't fit, right? We could see that more or less like that much of it doesn't really fit here. It's not gonna cut it off or anything like that. What it's gonna do is it's just going to shrink the overall font. So if maybe we're sitting on a font 9, to make all of this in the box fit inside the space, which it doesn't right now, it might move to like a size 8 font, and it might look a little bit silly. Okay, so you do want to address this scroll option. That's the first silly thing that happens with formatting for clauses. So what I may do is I might just select this last one, for example, and cut the whole thing, because I know it doesn't fit so well. It can't fit from here to here in the box, and I don't want there to be a scroll option. So what I may do is I may just kind of copy or cut and paste this one down here, and I'll have 2 clauses down on my last page. Okay, so there we go. This just fits a lot better. However, I'm formatting this as I go through. There we go. And again, I'll show you that really, really briefly here. So notice how when I go into this section, there is no scroll option on the right-hand side. But if I start to hit enter, something just like the most common feature in well, I don't know, the way that my brain is set up, because I'm so used to Microsoft Word and programs like that, is just when you start to hit enter, right, things should be coming from the page you're working on, and they should just automatically pop down into this other page. Notice that that's not happening with regards to formatting. Instead, if you make a big enough space, it actually gives you a scroll option here. Well, when you print something or you action this, it's going to kind of shrink it a little bit. So do address that so everything fits properly in this way, where when it does fit, there is no scroll option. Okay, so we've addressed that. We have all of our clauses all fitting properly now. Okay, like for example, if I saw that the size of this clause would fit really well right in this space over here, and maybe use up, right, like it might go all the way from here to here. Maybe I'll switch the position of those 2, like whatever the case may be. I just opted to have a little bit of a space here instead, and then have the full clauses on that second page. However you format it, it's going to be up to you, but just like you can move things around, you can change this, format it, whatever's going to look best for yourself. Okay, something else to notice, right? Well, you saw me making some minor changes as we went through, right? At some point, I am actually going to enter a value in these spaces. I might make them a bit bigger though, so that I can actually notice that they're there, right? They're so tiny in these paragraphs. Sometimes it's pretty hard to find that I have to put in like a time and a date on that little tiny line, right? So something that I like to do is use the find feature. If ever you're in here, I find that really useful. I'm on a Windows laptop and I'm using Google Chrome. So this is not a function of WEBForms, it's just a function of your browser, such as the Google Chrome browser I'm on. If on my keyboard I type Control F, I get this search pop-up. If I enter something like the letter A, it'll highlight all the letter A's or all the times that there's buyer in my paragraph. Well, it'll also work if I do an underscore. And maybe that really helps me action all of these. I just keep that there and I can do all of them. And it's just a really easy way to visually see all those really obscure underscores that I have to deal with as I fill them in. Just maybe a little tip for that part. I can see there's technically 24 of them in the document. That's all of these, right? Each of these individual ones is an underscore. There's 24. Things to keep in mind though, right? If this is and I know that's not the case, right? We just did a deposit further sum of and a whole bunch of environmental clauses. So forget that part of it. Let's say that we were setting up a standard residential sale. Well, we would only have to format these clauses once because we would be creating a transaction template, a template that's going to apply to all of my general residential sales, for example, right? And I could do this to all of them and have all of these spaces be larger for my standard transaction template. And I'm never going to have to deal with that formatting again because it'll be my kind of cookie cutter for that transaction type. Okay, so bear that in mind as well. Like you saw, it was maybe a little bit tedious how we had to take away that clause, cut it, and paste it down below. Well, if we did this transaction from scratch, right? If you're doing this as a transaction template, you're just formatting it one time. And then it's ready to go every time you approach that transaction type because the template's ready. Okay. I did get a quick question in the chat. Can you please show us that underscore one more time? For sure. So it's called the find feature. It's a part of your web browser and it's Control F. If you're on like a MacBook Pro, an Apple laptop, or anything like that, it'll be Command F. It's just a hotkey to find something. I wonder if, there we go. See that? If I go into my settings and I see find, the hotkey is Control F. So I can either just click here and click find, it'll pop up that menu, or on my keyboard I can do the hotkey Control F. Anytime you type something in the find menu, it shows you every instance on your screen of that item, such as seller, right? If I type in seller, it'll show me every time that seller comes up in the paragraphs here. Same as the underscore, I can see all the instances of the underscore. Okay. If you have any more questions about that, maybe we'll walk through that a bit in the Q&A as well. But it's a really, really neat feature, but it has to do with your browser, not WEBForms. If you're on Firefox, it's still going to be Control F. It just might be in a different menu if you're going to go over to it. Okay. Now that we've set up and formatted this, right, we can, we're getting to the point where we might be ready to send this to a signing partner. So let's look at that really quickly just as we conclude the session here. Right, again, I wasn't looking to fill in every single part of this, but if we were completed and we were ready to go, we can click on Send to Authentisign and start designing those 4 stages, right, of the e-signature process. For us instead, I'm going to save and exit, and I'm going to show you one more thing. As you can see, we have 3 different forms in our section here. Well, if that's part of what you were wondering, you absolutely can send all 3 at once, right? Mine aren't ready just yet. I haven't filled anything in, but I do want to show you. I can either select all 3 by doing the select all, or I can click them one at a time and notice them pop into the basket here. If I want to send all of my forms at once to Authentisign all at the same time, I do it from this screen because that's the screen that gives me the basket. If I click on the basket, it gives me, as we know, things that allow me to action all 3 at once, and one of them is an Authentisign pen. If I had 9 different forms, like a buyer representation agreement, whatever the case may be that makes up all 8 of those, well, I can just select them here, click the basket, send them to Authentisign. Same way that I can print them, save them as a PDF, email them, all that kind of stuff. If I click the pen, what you'll notice is we're going to be on that screen that we started today's session on, our 4 steps of the Authentisign process. If I was to go into details, maybe there's a quick edit that I want to do to my title so that it's 125 Navy Street, Melanie Scott. We know what happens when your signing participants are signing in order. We go to the participant screen. We can add a new participant such as Melanie Scott, Eric at OMDREB. Okay. I'm just going to leave the 1 participant. There is such a thing as layout mappings as well. Okay, this is just because when you do bring in a real estate transaction, WEBForms notices that and it just wants to know, hey, is there a particular contact that's going to come up, and would you like us to just do some of the design process for you with a layout, okay? I chose to ignore, totally up to you if you want to explore in that feature. When I go to the design, what this means is I want to do them manually because I didn't do the layout method, okay? What I wanted to show you, and I had to add a participant so that I could show you, is when I go to documents, there's all 3 of them. We added these all at once, okay? You don't have to add them one at a time. You can add all 3, you can add all 8. You can bring them in all at the same time if that's a little bit easier for you. And we could see here that our ARIA, agreement of purchase and sale, is 7 pages, our FinTrack is 2 pages, and our waiver is 1 page, which means when we go to the design section, we are going to have 10 pages, preparing 10-page document, okay? And how they are laid out is on top of each other, all 10. After our second Schedule A page, it will begin. It looks like our FinTrack was next. It's a 2-pager, and our waiver is last. Okay, they're all there, same as how we started the session. Just important to notice, right? We just kind of came full circle, and I know we started with the Authentisign section, but here's what it would look like if we went through from the start of the transaction all the way to the part where we're sending invitations for an e-signature. Okay, and we're just designing it and going to each of those pages and doing our initials, our dates, our signatures, all that kind of stuff.